Mary Nevin went out on Friday evening with her friend Joan. They went to dinner. Joan chose the establishment, the hotel restaurant. The food was very tasty and Mary was relaxed around Joan. She drank some wine with dinner. There was a dance club next door to the restaurant. Mary and Joan heard music just starting to play as they finished their dessert. Mary drank cognac with dessert. Joan began swaying to the music. She wanted to look at the club. Mary and Joan have been friends since college. They were both 28 years old. Both were cute. Joan was light brown, of average height and build, with a beautiful face. Mary was taller and slimmer, with dark hair and black eyes. She was very beautiful and knew it. There was one big difference between them. Joan was single and never married. Mary was married to Paul Nevin, and she had 2 children, 4 and 3 years old. That night they were with her parents, and Paul was on a business trip and was expected to return on Saturday afternoon. So when Joan wanted to just drop by at the dance club, Mary was okay with it. Joan was dressed for a club. A short dress, not too loose, red, high heels. Mary's dress was sleeveless. The skirt was loose and fell below the knees. She wore high-heeled sandals that matched her blue dress. They looked into the entrance of the club. The guy on the door was always interested in letting single women into the club. He gave them a card for a free drink. They entered, walked slowly to the bar, and ordered. Joan took a gin and tonic. Mary took another cognac. She was clearly drunk when 2 sailors approached them. The music had a good rhythm. Mary swayed to it. A tall, dark-haired sailor asked her to dance. The blonde, stocky man invited Joan. Mary agreed. It was a fast dance, and she liked to dance. Her new friend's name was Ronnie. He was 6 feet 2 in, slim, and very handsome. He was also a good dancer. Mary was having fun and went on to dance another number with Ronnie. She lost sight of Joan. It's okay. The third dance from the DJ was slow and Ronnie simply pulled Mary closer to him. She didn't resist. She was excited. A low flutter began in her stomach. She was vaguely aware that she was in trouble. Mary liked it all. Ronnie seemed very big against her. The slow dance is over. Ronnie turned her face towards him and kissed her. Ronnie then took her hand and led her to a booth. Joan was there with another guy. She kissed him. Ronnie said it was time to go. Joan, and as it turned out, Mace stood up. All 4 went outside. Joan arrived by car. Her SUV was parked right there. She and Mace sat in front. Ronnie and Mary are in the back. Joan's apartment was a 5-minute drive. The apartment is on the 1st floor. Mary, thinking about what she was doing, decided that she should just please him but not have sex. She was more excited than she had ever been in her life, maybe ever. Once the 4 of them were inside, Joan led Mace straight to her bedroom. She had a guest room with a double bed and an extension on top, for her nephews when they come to visit. Ronnie waited until the other 2 were safely in the other room. Then he pulled Mary into his arms again and kissed her. Ronnie noticed her engagement ring. He knew that she was married, but he thought that she came to the club with her friend to sleep. So, no problem. He was happy to satisfy her. After a few minutes, lying on the bed in his arms, Mary began to realize what she had done. Change it, God, she cheated on Paul, to gender and to their children. She was scared, a bit scary. She sat down. When she did this, Ronnie woke up. He had been dozing. What's wrong, baby? I'm sorry, Ronnie. This shouldn't have happened. I don't know what came over me. It's me. Ronnie laughed uncertainly. It's not funny. I don't even know your last name. I've never done such a thing. I'm not a woman of easy virtue. Jenkins, my last name. I had fun. You too. Can't you just not tell anyone about this except Joan? Who would know? Where's your husband? He's on a business trip and the kids are with my parents. Children? God. Children. 2, Amanda 3, Paul Jr. 4. I've never been like this. Well, everyone messes up sometimes, Mary. All of us. Let's slip up again. In the morning, you can go home and be a mom again. They had sex again. Mary woke up at dawn around 6 in the morning. Ronnie was fast asleep. She sneaked into the living room, covering herself with her dress. Nobody seemed to be awake. Mary began to put on her dress when she heard a soft whistle. It was Mace. He left Joan's room. He was naked. Mary looked at him. They silently had sex. Thank you. He was an American. She knew when he said that. These were the first words she heard from him. It turned out that he was Greek and had been here for several days. Ronnie served in the U.S. Navy. They met and went out in search of women, and they found Mary and Joan. Mary returned because she heard applause. She looked. Joan and Ronnie watched her and Mace have sex. When it was over, they applauded. It must have been good fun. I didn't tell you that you could take my boyfriend, Mary. Shame on you, you prostitute. Joan giggled as she said this. Mary blushed. She felt low again for being so light. She stood up and looked at Joan. Here, I'm returning it to you the same way I found it. Thank you. She and Ronnie were naked too. She said, Go take a shower, Mary. These guys have to catch the bus in 40 minutes. There were 2 bathrooms. Mary took a shower in the guest bathroom, put on her dress, and washed her panties. She found her shoes in the living room and brushed her hair. By the time Joan and the boys were ready, she had cooked the eggs. They ate quickly, and all 4 of them drove off in Joan's car. She dropped the guys off at the bus stop at the last minute. Joan took Mary home. Paul was due back around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 10:30. They were going to pick up the children from her parents' house and stay for Sunday lunch at 2 o'clock the next day, so that they have time to be alone. Mary wasn't sure how it would go. She asked Joan, Do I look different now that I'm a prostitute? It wasn't meant to be funny. No, Mary. Just wash yourself and put on something nice, make dinner. Serve him well tonight. Everything will be fine. I feel so. So dirty. I think when he looks at me, he'll see. He'll see it. I mean, since last night I've turned into something. What happened? Your hidden side has caught you. I never expected this when we went out. I just thought you'd dance with the guy and we'd go home. Or maybe I'll take them both home. But baby, you really surprised me. Sorry, I should have protected you. But I got carried away with Mace. And, you're a big girl. Yeah, I don't blame you. Okay, also, you had a really good time which you can carry with you and think about. Maybe I need to get some gratitude. I did. I had the best sex of my life. I just hope I still have a husband. Mary, he doesn't have X-ray vision. You're the one who feels different, but you don't look different. Well, you'll look different when you're washed and changed. Cook something, go back to housewife mode, and then have sex with him. He will never notice that you are different. Maybe not. Maybe not. Well, what's done is done. Mary went inside and followed Joan's advice. She took another good shower. She examined her body for marks. There was nothing. When she thought about it, she was amazed. It was warm, but she thought she would fill the house with pleasant smells. So she fried some onions, caramelized them. She then cooked garlic chicken. She was going to make a cold dish with chicken, onions, and a big salad. She heard an Uber outside. She walked to the door to meet Paul. Paul was a nice guy. He was 5'9", slim, with brown hair and eyes. He was handsome in the traditional sense. But what attracted her to him was his wit and humor, and his general intelligence. He never seemed lost no matter what happened. He knew how to deal with it. He hugged her tightly. He picked up his duffel bag, and they entered the house. Smells good in here, and you look good to me. Paul smiled and joked, raising an eyebrow. He only left on Tuesday morning. She didn't expect him to immediately take her to bed, but she saw that he wanted it. She wasn't sure. She would like to talk first, but he grabbed her. Then he took her hand and led her upstairs to the bedroom. She decided to go with the flow. What choice did she have? Well, welcome home, big boy. I love you, Mary, and you really turned it on today. She maybe wasn't usually so aggressive. That's what he meant. She lied. I've been thinking about you, baby, for days. They got up and got dressed again. They went downstairs and Paul grabbed a beer. Mary poured some white wine. They relaxed on the terrace. Mary thought about what she might say when Paul asked her what she had been doing in his absence. She asked him about the trip. He worked as a consultant on new construction. This trip was to Ohio, a 5-story office building for which the builder wanted a second opinion about console sections. Everything went well. I proposed, and they were grateful. I climbed the area, though. Slept well. I called Friday night. Where were you? I went to dinner with Joan. We went to Bennett's at the hotel. I must have turned off my phone. What was it like in this place? Food was okay. Drinks were good. Good to know. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Dinner was good. They watched an episode of Midsummer Murders. It was boring, but cozy. Then, in bed, they made love again. Paul was happy. The next day, they had sex again mid-morning, did a crossword puzzle, and then went to her parents' house for Sunday lunch. It was nice. Paul was happy to see the children. Mother Mary Felma noticed that Mary was somewhat depressed. "What's the matter with you today, Mary?" "Nothing special. I had a bad night on Friday. It's over now." "What's a bad night?" "It's none of your concern, Mom." Mary breathed a sigh of relief when they returned home in the evening and put the children to bed. They watched football for a while. Then Paul started pestering again. Mary didn't want sex, but she thought she owed it to Paul. So they're at it again. Mary tried her best, and Paul was pleased. But Mary, not so much. She thought about it later, after Paul had fallen asleep. Mary hoped she hadn't been spoiled by sex with Paul after her fantastic experience on Friday and Saturday. She decided that she would have to improve her performance, perhaps by fantasizing about Ronnie and Mace. Maybe she can be slutty for her husband, how she was the first time. Then she thought that she might need to recharge her batteries from time to time so that she could use fantasies to save her marriage. She started giggling, and she thought about how often she would have to do this and how it could work. She dozed off. Paul returned to work on Monday, and Mary took the children to preschool, then went to her part-time job as an accountant. Joan worked there too. When Mary arrived, Joan looked at her. During a coffee break, they discussed the events. Mary said Joan was right. Paul didn't notice any change in Mary, but Mary noticed the changes. She didn't enjoy sex with Paul. Joan said, "You have to find something to excite you when you're with him. You can try thinking about those two guys." I did. I felt guilty. It worked the first time. Then I felt guilty. Last night, I thought I might have to have some great sexual experiences just to help with Paul. And when I thought I wanted sex, but Paul was asleep. Just see how things work out. I wouldn't be looking for more lovers right now if I were you. Right? They returned to work. During the day, Mary actually thought about those two very attractive men she had sex with just a few days ago. The idea of having sex with Paul while thinking about them began to seem acceptable. She'll try it tonight after the kids are asleep. She picked up the kids from preschool and cooked dinner. Paul came home at 6. They had a nice dinner with the kids. She really loved Paul. He was a great father, and in bed he tried. He almost always satisfied her before her adventure. The children went to bed at 8. Paul was drinking beer in the living room when Mary, wearing only a tank top, sat on his lap. She took the beer, drank a little, and put it aside. Then she kissed Paul. "I want it now. Here." She used a commanding tone. She stood up and took off her dress, standing naked in the living room. Now she felt like that same depraved woman. Paul stood up and took off his gym shorts. Paul was stunned by Mary. That Tuesday, Paul was a little distracted at work. He realized that he liked it when Mary was aggressive in bed. She was never like this. Paul had a girlfriend in college who loved to dominate him, and he liked it then too. But he couldn't imagine doing this with Mary, who was his wife and long-term partner. Nevertheless, he responded to it. That night, after the children went to bed, Mary practically dragged Paul into their bed. On Wednesday at work, Paul felt a little discomfort when he went to the toilet. He became worried. He made an appointment with his GP that same day. When he went, a young physician's assistant was assigned to see him as an emergency patient. The physician's assistant was a young woman in her early 20s. Paul was confused. He explained his problem. Susan, the physician's assistant, immediately understood his problem from his description. She asked him to pull down his pants and examined him. She took a sample of the discharge and a blood test. She then told him that Dr. Mason would see him soon. George Mason had been Paul's therapist since he was 12. He has also been Mary's therapist since they were married. He entered the office. He didn't look happy at all. Paul became worried. Mason said, "Paul, I think you have a sexually transmitted disease. The lab results won't be back until the morning, but it's definitely her. I should report this to the county and take your sexual history a recent one." Paul was stunned. Since he married Mary, he has been 100% faithful to her. And that meant only one thing. "Doc, is it always sexually transmitted?" "Yes, sometimes, very rarely, it may not be so. But the answer is yes. So who did you have sexual contact with?" "With Mary, and only with her." Mason looked at him carefully. Paul was looking straight at him. Mason said, with some regret, "She will have to come to the reception tomorrow. Are you home now?" "For now, yes." Women with this disease often have no symptoms, but men usually do. So it's likely Mary doesn't know she has it, if that's the case. Her name should also be reported to the county. I'll wait until the end of the day to send this, to give you a chance to talk. Dr. Mason gave Paul an injection in the arm. He told Paul that this was all the treatment needed if the symptoms did not go away by Friday. If he still has discharge by Monday, he should come back again. Paul left the building in a daze, but as he drove home, he began to get angry. Mary slept with someone else. They have small children. How could she do this? Paul entered the house still angry. The children came up and hugged him. Mary greeted him, not understanding why he came so early. "I have bad news. We need to talk." He sent the kids to the playroom and played a video game for them. They loved it and didn't get this opportunity often. When he returned to the kitchen, Mary was sitting at the table, looking unsure. Paul stood over her. "I have a disease, and I got it from you." Mary almost fainted. Her world turned upside down with those words. It was a complete and utter disaster. "Paul, I'm so sorry. Oh God, oh shit." She started to cry. Paul discovered that he had absolutely no empathy. "You have to go to Dr. Mason tomorrow morning. You have to tell him where you got it from. I want an explanation." "Paul, I never wanted this. I went to dinner with Joan. I was drinking. She wanted to go to a dance club nearby just to check it out. The guy on the door gave us a free drink card. I had another drink, and the guy asked me to dance. And I found him attractive. Then Joan started an affair with his friend. She wanted to go to her house, and I agreed." "And was it worth it? Sex?" "No, I liked it. Suddenly, I became an overweight woman of easy virtue. I can't explain it any more than that. And there's something else. In the morning, I slept with a second guy. They were sailors, but the second guy was from a foreign navy." She lowered her eyes. "Sorry. You had unprotected sex with 2 men you met that night." Paul was in despair, but it grew out of it. He started to get angry again. "My God." He turned and left the house. She heard his truck start. He left. The children heard the last cry. They entered the room crying. Mary was crying too. But she stopped and calmed them down. She wondered if Paul would ever return. Mary picked up the phone while the kids were eating snacks. She went into another room and called Mason's office. She agreed to come there in the morning. Then she called Joan. Joan replied, "How are you, Mary?" "Oh, Joan, I infected Paul. I'm probably infected too. And you probably are too. But you didn't have sex with Ronnie." Damn, are you sure? Paul has already been to the doctor. You need to go tomorrow and tell them who you had sex with. I'm going to see Mason at 8 o'clock in the morning. Before the office opens, you can come with me. Oh my God, Mary. What did Paul say? Did you tell him what happened? I told him. He turned and left. Maybe you should just leave him alone for a while. I mean, what can you tell him? Not much. I myself don't understand what happened, so I can't explain it to him. If he asks me if I'll do it again, how can I say I won't? Maybe I will. Paul went to see a friend, Jerry Williams. He told Williams what happened. Williams was a good friend and allowed Paul to stay if he wanted. Williams also knew Joan. In fact, Joan's apartment was about 40 meters from his. He told Paul about this. He then showed Paul where she lived. Paul went to knock on Joan's door. Joan didn't look through the peephole before opening the door. She was shocked to see Paul and scared. But Paul went inside. Paul, you shouldn't be here. I just want to understand why Mary did it. I mean, why? I don't know, Paul. I should have protected her. But I got carried away with another guy. By the time I thought about something, I was already carried away and only thought about sex. Sorry. It's nothing personal, Joan, but Mary. She's not like that. That's what I thought, at least. If she can do this, I can't stay. The children. He cried, and so did Joan. They hugged, and she patted him on the back. He straightened up. Sorry, Joan. That's my problem. I might have thought you could tell me more. No. Well, the guy was hot. I can't deny it. And the other guy was hot too. Maybe sometimes women need to get carried away. Need. Sex. Hot sex. I need it. So I understand. But Mary never seemed like that until now. Paul left and spent the night in Jerry's apartment, in agony. He called work the next day, saying that he would be late and stopped at home to change clothes and shower. I packed my bag. He called his parents and briefly explained what happened. They were both stunned. Mary and Joan went to see Dr. Mason, both met with the doctor's assistant Mason, then entered the room with both of them. He had positive results from Paul, so he was inclined to give Mary the injection, but he didn't. He told them both to come back the next day. They all assumed that they would both need injections, but Mason realized that Joan had sex with only one of the guys, so maybe she was okay. They were both asymptomatic. Dr. Mason was an experienced physician, but he was shocked by what he learned from Mary and Joan, especially from Mary, a woman with small children. After the consultation, he returned to his office and called his wife to talk. Paul went to work and then went to his parents' house for dinner. Mary called his mobile phone, but he did not answer. He had a laptop, and she sent him an email. She sent him a text message. She only wrote that she loved him. He must return home for the sake of his children. Paul had dinner with his parents, Dan and Ellen. They were so surprised by Mary's behavior. Paul's father was basically in favor of divorce, but his mother told him to wait. She believed that Paul should return to be with the children, but perhaps not sleep with Mary. So he did. He took things from Jerry's apartment and returned home. The children were sleeping. Mary seemed pleased to see him, but wary. He told her, "I'm here, but I won't sleep with you. Maybe never, but I love children and won't leave them without a fight. I still apologize. I can sleep in the living room." She went and took things from the bedroom and moved into the living room. There was a fold-out sofa. They didn't talk much. They just went to bed early. Paul was tossing and turning. Mary hardly slept. The thing is, when she fell asleep, she was woken up by dreams about Ronnie and Mace, and these weren't nightmares. When she was awake enough to understand, she was horrified at first. She was ashamed of this, but it was pleasant. Mary and Joan went to see Dr. Mason again the next day. They both tested positive and were given an injection and instructions not to have sex for 7 days. Sex with other people. Mary went home straight away. She picked up the kids from daycare and gave them a snack. Paul came home and they ate dinner, trying to make things as normal as possible for the kids. Mary reported her and Joan's positive result. The floor was in the bedroom after dinner and putting the kids to bed. Mary then received a call on her cell phone from a number she did not recognize. It was Ronnie. "Mary, I hope I haven't done anything wrong. You shouldn't have called here, called me. I'm in big trouble for this." I tested negative. It wasn't me. "Oh, okay, well, I'm happy for you. Can you talk? Is your husband home?" "Not right here, no, but there's no reason to talk. I wanted to say that I had the best time with you. I'm at the base and would like to see you again, if you can." "I don't think so. I'm trying to save my marriage right now. And besides, I can't do anything for a week anyway, even if I wanted to." "I'm sure you want to." "Damn, Ronnie, please. How did you get that number?" "Joan, I got it from her. She said you might. Be free soon. If that happens, I'll think of you." "I think you're already thinking about me. I dream about you, Mary." "I'm hanging up now." And she did. But she was breathing heavily. She was determined to do whatever it took to save the marriage. And that meant staying away from temptation. From Ronnie. She thought about it seriously. She decided to try to bring Paul back to her bed and to herself. She could hold on, although now she knew that she was a woman of easy virtue. She could offer to be that way for him. Sooner or later, she will get it. And then he will see if this is enough. Paul was equally determined to have nothing to do with Mary. She had fallen greatly in his eyes from a loving wife and mother to a depraved woman. He sat in the bedroom while Mary thought about her plans. He thought they could live like this as roommates for a while. But then he thought that sooner or later this would lead to both of them having other sexual partners. Because they are young and they need sex. But, well, he'll just see what happens. Mary began wearing more revealing clothes after work. When Paul came home, she was in a short, sleeveless dress, and only in that. She saw that Paul noticed this. After a week of abstinence, Mary's company intensified. When the children went to bed, she came downstairs only in a long t-shirt. Her breasts were swaying. Her ass was often exposed, even just when walking. Paul took the beer. He was going to watch the game. She sat down opposite him. She could be completely naked. He looked at her. She smiled at him. "I'm going to get you, Paul. You won't be able to hold on much longer. Why don't you just give up now?" "Because of what you did. You are a woman of easy virtue." "I admit it. But maybe it wouldn't be so bad to have someone like that for a wife." "Stop it, Mary." "No." He couldn't help it. Mary felt so strong. She pressed her advantage. She had sex with him. "I can't deny you. I tried. You just took me. You can do this to me any time you want. It's not fair." "I don't care about justice. I'm a girl, and I just want to have fun." She giggled. Paul smiled. But deep down, he was worried about how this might all end. Just a few days ago, Mary slept with 2 guys. It was obvious that this experience had changed her, turned her into someone other than she was. He wondered how long he could satisfy her. Well, he thought, I can only try. Paul said, "Mary, are you going to be faithful to me and our family?" You know the old song, if you want a woman who always does the right thing, you gotta be a man who always does the right thing at night. She smiled a sly smile. You sure made a good start, stud. She stood up and went to the kitchen to get some wine, shaking her ass. Paul thought she was another woman. He loved old Mary, but he was completely captured by this depraved version. You'll just have to go with the flow and see what happens, and that will be. He told himself that he was still angry about the infidelity, but he was lying. That night they went to bed together. The next morning Mary was in a great mood as she and Paul fed the children and got them ready for kindergarten. Paul drove them and Mary went to work. Paul moved through his day in a slight daze. His life has changed so much. He wasn't sure if he liked it, but whenever he thought about Mary, he was excited. Several women in his office noticed this. One, Heather Childs, approached him as he returned from the coffee machine. She was a beautiful woman in her early 30s, well-built and lively. She was between husbands. But whose? You're in a strange state, Paul. Maybe you need some relief. Now. Oh, Heather, thanks for the thought. I couldn't right now. But I will say this. My relationship with Mary is in transition. And depending on the situation, maybe I'll be open to all kinds of new things. Paul, if you keep walking around the office like this, all the women will be distracted and won't do anything. So, well, just a word. Paul smiled. Then she left. Paul went to the toilet. When he came out a few minutes later, Heather looked up at him from her desk, which she assumed was security for the restroom. Oh, Paul, I'm offended. But she laughed. Two other women also laughed. But Paul returned home without further visits to the toilet. He cooked hamburgers and made salad while Mary played with the children. She tumbled on the floor and laughed with them, like the old version of her. They had dinner, read bedtime stories, and turned off the lights in the room. Paul went to the kitchen and cleaned up. Mary waited until he finished, then pulled him to bed. She was just as aggressive as the night before. She attacked him. He couldn't resist when she wanted him. Sex was not entirely in her control, only when she wanted sex. Several days passed without a break from Mary. Paul was a young man 28 years old. He was in good shape and had stamina. After 2 weeks, he was exhausted. But strangely enough, this did not stop him from continuing when Mary wanted him. They both suspected, but didn't say out loud, that Paul liked to submit to Mary in bed. But they didn't talk about it. 2 weeks later, Paul said to Mary, after the children had gone to bed, "I need a day of rest. I'm exhausted. I know you can get me if you want, but I'm asking for mercy tonight." Mary smiled at him. Paul and Mary enjoyed wonderful sex for several months. Paul had almost forgotten about the night of his betrayal. Almost. Mary never forgot. Ronnie called and asked if she was ready. Is her husband ready to let her come to him? She always said, not yet. Mary and Paul went to his company's corporate party at the hotel. Dinner and dancing. They both got dressed. Mary looked great. Paul too. After dinner, the dancing began. Mary attracted several men who asked her to dance. She wasn't thrilled with them, but agreed. She wanted to help Paul with his work. Paul was also busy dancing. Heather led him away from the table for 2 dances, then Susan from accounting and Betty, her boss. All 3 danced close to him and did not hide it. When Paul finally returned to the table, Mary was impressed. She could see that Paul could easily have sex with these 3 women, maybe even with all of them at once, but he was their boss. This could be a problem. On the way back home, Mary said, "Those women all wanted you, baby. I'm surprised you didn't take advantage, especially Heather." "I'm busy, Mary. You keep me busy every night." She laughed. "You like it, but maybe you want to be the one who takes it. You could take any of these 3. "What are you suggesting, Mary?" He turned the car into the garage. He paid the nurse, who went home. Mary then took Paul, again. Afterward, Mary said, "Paul, all this sex is great, but maybe I saw how attracted you were to those women." Paul turned to her. "Who do you want to have sex with?" Mary blushed. "I like the guy who seduced me, Ronnie. He calls. I turned him down many times. He is persistent. I don't want this. I can't stand it, I don't think." "Well, even if you're with other women, like in an open marriage." "I don't want that. Sex with that Ronnie guy must have been great, if you say things like that." "It was great, Paul. I won't lie. And our marriage got so hot after that. You want Heather, and I want Ronnie. After we sleep with them, we'll have a lot of hot sex. I want it. I know you'll like it." Paul didn't say anything. They didn't discuss the idea of an open marriage further that night, but Paul was scared. It was one thing for Mary to stumble on a drunken night. It's another thing entirely when she's going to sleep with this guy again. He was afraid that the sex was so much better with Ronnie that she would risk the marriage for one more time. Mary thought she was well on her way to convincing Paul to have an open relationship. Sex with Ronnie was truly the best experience of her life. She liked to dominate Paul, but the thought of Ronnie would not let her go. Mary called Ronnie. They agreed to meet the following weekend. She will come to him after work on Friday and stay until Sunday afternoon. But he asked, "What about your husband? Is he okay with this? I don't want any trouble. He can go to my commander." "He won't. I told him he's going to have sex with the woman at work who's always chasing him." "And he agreed?" "Well, he'll agree. Mary, if he objects, we won't be able to do this. Got it?" "Yes, he won't be a problem." But he was a problem. Mary sat down with Paul after the children went to bed on Sunday. "Honey, I've made an appointment with Ronnie for next weekend, from Friday night until Sunday. So if you want to be with Heather, we need to find a babysitter or talk to your parents." "Mary, I'm not going to do this. I want you to understand clearly that if you go to that guy or anyone else, it's the end for us." Mary was stunned. She thought Paul would, well, submit to her. "I'm not bargaining, Paul. I made an appointment. I want a meeting. Everything will be fine after. It will be great for us." "Mary, the answer is no. No. You want to tell me no, what are you going to do, get a divorce? I don't think so. The kids will be with me. Y'all have to move. Maybe Ronnie will move in with us, so it's going to happen. Find Heather." "I won't. I won't be with Heather. If you do that, I'll divorce you. I'll at least get a visitation." Damn, this could be so good. Paul stood up slowly and walked into the kitchen. He sat down at the table and thought about his situation. He thought his marriage was over. Saying no was the right thing to do, but he believed Mary would do it anyway and try to hide it. Or maybe he won't even try to hide it. Either way, he couldn't imagine staying with her. He began to cry quietly. He just sat at the table, silently sobbing. His mood darkened. He held his head in his hands when Mary looked into the room. She was shocked. "Paul, please don't cry, baby. I won't do it. If it's that important to you, I won't do it." Paul didn't say anything. He wasn't sobbing, but he was still crying quietly. He didn't look up. Mary put her arm around his shoulder. "It's okay, Paul. Everything will be fine. I won't do this." "How can I be sure?" Paul looked at her. "I wouldn't have known last time if you hadn't infected me. So, I give you my promise." He looked at her. There was no trust in his eyes, and she could see it. She was in pain. But she also knew that sooner or later she would have sex with Ronnie. She just needs to be more subtle and convincing. They went to bed, but without sex. The next morning, they sent the children to kindergarten and went to work. There was little talk. Paul scheduled a consultation with a family law attorney, Linda Moore. That day, he explained his situation to her. She told him that he would be able to see the children, but it was very likely that he would not get custody even if his wife cheated. Money he will have to pay her a share, support the children and her, since their incomes are not equal. Since he slept with Mary after her first infidelity, this could not be a reason. If she does it again, it will be grounds for divorce. They then talked about what he could do proactively. She wanted to know Ronnie's name, and Paul got it from Joan Jenkins. She found his address. The two of them wrote him a letter. The letter stated that Paul knew of a previous sexual relationship between Jenkins and Mary Nevin. Paul also knew that they had agreed to have further sexual relations over the weekend. Paul argued that such a relationship would be illegal and immoral, and he in no way approved of it. He also indicated that such a relationship would be a violation of military rules. He said that if Jenkins had sexual relations with Paul's wife, Paul would report it to local law enforcement and Jenkins' superiors at the Navy. He will also take Jenkins to court, since he has now been warned. They drafted this letter, full of legalese, and Paul signed it and notarized it. They then hired a courier to deliver it to Jenkins in person. Paul also paid for surveillance to be installed in their apartment the next day when Mary was not home. He also installed the program on her mobile phone while it was charging in the evening. Paul had another business trip in 2 weeks. Paul returned to work and left a little early. He came home, and was there when Mary brought the children. They had a pleasant evening playing with the children. Mary prepared dinner, chicken fried with rice and onions. While the children were being read bedtime stories, Paul received a message that the letter had been delivered. He and Mary went downstairs. They barely spoke, and Mary was not dressed seductively. Paul didn't feel ready for seduction either. About 40 minutes after the message, Mary's phone rang. She looked at him and walked into the kitchen, away from Paul. He moved so that he could hear but not be seen. "You shouldn't call. I told you." "What? Are you kidding? What exactly is written there?" There was a pause. "That bastard, I'll contact you later." Paul returned to the living room. Mary burst in. "What have you done? You sent Ronnie a threatening letter. You bastard." "I'm trying to save our marriage. He's a threat to that. I'm doing what I can." Damn it. He won't come near me now. You ruined everything." "I hope so. If you want other men, we're getting a divorce. You promised me you wouldn't. You promised me when we got married, and then after you messed up. I told you it would be fun for both of us. An open marriage. A lot of people live like that." "Not me. Not me, Mary. Not now. Not ever. If this is what you want, we need to break up." Mary ran upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. Both children woke up and Paul went to calm them down. He then settled into the guest room. He tried to read the book, but only got worried. He heard Mary talking on the phone, but could not make out what was said. Mary called Ronnie from the bedroom. In a previous conversation, Ronnie told her that they needed to cool down. He couldn't risk everything Paul had promised to do. Now Mary called him back. "Ronnie, I'm sorry about all this. I thought I could convince Paul. I couldn't. And now I don't think he trusts me to keep my word. That's why he sent that letter." "Yeah, well, it worked. We could have had a good time, but it's not worth the risk. For me, and honestly, for you too. You have kids, a family. I'm sorry for possibly disturbing that." "I see. I again sorry. This could be great." "It was great. I hope your family survives. But Mary, if not, don't call me anyway. I don't want to be your holy grail." "Oh, I see. You mean it." "Yes, I'm really sorry. Everything you've been through, and he's been through too, part of it is on me." They said goodbye. Mary put on her nightgown and went to bed. She needed to think. Paul was also lying in his bed in the guest room, not very comfortable. He made a mental note that he needed to buy new mattresses for the room. But he was stuck thinking about the future. He was stuck because although he loved old Mary, he wasn't sure about this Mary. She was an excellent sexual partner and knew how to appeal to his submissive side. But this may not be the basis for a long-lasting partnership. Let's assume he went through with the divorce, even if it prevented further infidelities as he intended. How long? He wasn't going to spend all his time watching Mary closely. And even if he did, she could still cheat and it might go unnoticed. He didn't make any decision. He decided to let things die down and see what happened. But he knew he had to be careful not to let Mary put him down again. Mary also made this decision, but for different reasons. She believed that she was still in love with Paul. He was so good with children. He made good money. He was smart, funny, and well-read, and the sex was good. Before and after they discovered her ability to control him. But sex with Ronnie, and also with Mace, was better. She felt she could have better sex with other men than with Paul. She could just go to a dance club and find a hot guy. A bit risky, she learned, but probably not so possible if she were a single mother. She didn't want to be a single mother, no matter how much Paul could help. She wanted Paul, and she wanted sex with strangers, so she decided that she would have to see how things would develop. It's always possible that the marriage was irreparably broken, and Paul lost all trust in her. They both decided to take a wait-and-see approach, take a closer look at each other. They had been wary of each other all week. Paul was still sleeping in the living room. They brought another set of mattresses, and it replaced the old ones. He began to sleep better. He was getting used to this routine. Mary became increasingly frustrated. Friday came the day she was supposed to have sex with Ronnie. She left work, texted Paul that she was going to Joan's, and went to Joan's apartment as planned. They drank wine. Mary explained what was happening. Joan said, "It could have been worse. You could have gotten a divorce. I mean, you really messed up." "No doubt, but I had the experience and I liked it. Why should I settle for less? To stay married, that's why Paul is a great husband, and he satisfies you in bed. Not every woman can have what you have with him. He can be your slave, except for the idea of an open marriage." Mary smiled. The reminder of how much power she had over Paul in their daily sex life was nice. She said, "Maybe you and I could dominate him together. You could have sex with him, and then I could find a boyfriend." "Are you offering me your husband?" "He'll do almost anything. Just think." "I think, God, I've always liked him." "Anything you want, as much as you want. He's obedient. You can come over for dinner tonight, and then we'll just take him and do whatever we want with him. You like him. I've seen the way he looks at you." "Oh, that's tempting, but it could ruin your marriage, and he might be happy about it, but still won't agree to an open marriage." "We can only try." Mary laughed. Joan too. Mary said, "We'll arrange it for Thursday before he leaves." Mary returned home. Paul had prepared dinner, and he and the children were already eating. Mary sat down and took over with them. They played video games as a family. Then they put the children to bed. Paul was watching TV when Mary came in wearing her sexy t-shirt. She sat opposite him with her legs stretched out, her toes pointing. Paul was instantly excited, but he was determined to resist. "Mary, I see what you are doing. What do you want?" "You, my husband." The next morning, he woke up next to Mary. He tried to resist her, tried so hard, but when he was alone with her, she could do whatever she wanted with him. He accepted it. He stood up and cleaned himself up. Mary, too. She grinned at him at breakfast with the children, but said nothing. Everyone went to school and work. Paul was really depressed. He felt trapped. He needed to get away from Mary. If he doesn't leave, he'll end up babysitting while she sleeps with guys she met at the dance hall. But it seemed that leaving her also meant leaving the children. He called Linda Moore, the lawyer. He came to her office, and they discussed his options. A divorce would mean that he would see the children, at best, on weekends. It was probable, and he would have to pay alimony and child support. He could afford it, but the prospect depressed him. He also thought that Mary would find herself a big guy and introduce him into her life and the lives of the children. If that happened, he'd have to. Well, he'd already been through enough. They also discussed living apart. He could have just moved out, hold children when appropriate, find your own place, not seeing Mary especially at night. That's what he was leaning towards. He asked if it was worth entering into a written agreement. They discussed it and decided not to do it for now. Paul made some plans and found a place close to home and work. The next day, he also visited the bank. He opened a new account and left a small amount in a regular checking account, arranged a direct transfer of salary to a new account. The savings were only in his name. The house was rented. Paul and Mary slept in the same bed, but neither of them was particularly interested in sex. Mary had her own plans for Thursday. On Wednesday morning, she told Paul that she had invited Joan to dinner on Thursday. He didn't mind. Despite her role in the disease epidemic, he liked her. On Wednesday night, after the children were asleep, Paul began trying to have regular sex with Mary. At first, she seemed unhappy, but she answered. Then they hugged. Mary was happy. She thought Paul was expressing his love. For Paul, it was a nostalgic gesture, nothing more. He made his decision. On Thursday afternoon, he put down a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment 6 blocks from work and a mile from home. Dinner with Joan, Mary, and the children was fun. The children loved Joan, and she and Paul would play with them while Mary cooked. She made stir-fried beef and rice and ice cream for dessert. The 3 of them put the children to bed. Then Mary and Joan turned on music in the living room and opened a bottle of wine. Mary changed into a strapless dress and no shoes. Joan wore a soft blue blouse and flowy skirt on high heels. Paul felt uneasy. Mary sat down next to Paul on the sofa. Joan sat down opposite them in the chair. I'm going to take you in front of Joan. She wants to see what I can do. Paul was both horrified and excited, being crushed by Mary right in front of Joan. Joan said quietly, Mary told me all about you, Paul. I want to see. It's so exciting. Mary whispered to Paul, I want you to take off your clothes right here in front of Joan. Now. Mary stood up and stood next to the sofa. Paul stood up. He looked at Joan, then at Mary. Joan said, Take off your clothes, Paul. I want to see you. She extended her hand to NKMU. She smiled. Mary scolded Joan. Don't touch my man, Joan. He's mine for now. Joan pouted. Paul ran. He ran upstairs. He had his bag packed for the trip. He took it, put on his jacket, and went downstairs. Mary and Joan were standing in the corridor. They watched Paul run away. When he returned, Mary said, What do you think you're doing? Paul said, I'm leaving. I see it was a trap. You were going to force me to have sex with Joan and then claim you have the right to sleep with someone else. An open marriage. Well, that won't work. He turned to Joan. I can't believe you helped her. Joan said, I thought it would work. Smooth out the situation. Save the marriage. And of course I would get sex. Sorry, I was wrong. This is so manipulative. I won't be manipulated anymore, Mary. You can sleep with whoever you want, but not with me. Not with me. He turned and left. Mary just stared, stunned. She started crying. God, Joan, what have I done? He'll come back, won't he? Maybe. He's leaving on a business trip tomorrow, isn't he? Yes, 4 days in Cincinnati. I think he'll come back after this. You should rethink your actions, I think. They finished their bottle of wine. Joan stayed overnight. Paul went to the motel. The next day he went to work, picked up another suit, and drove towards Ohio. He arranged for furniture to be delivered to his new apartment. Double bed, several chairs, TV, pots and pans. Heather took care of it. She wondered if she would be able to stay at his new place anytime soon. Paul called home to talk to the children every night. When Mary answered the first call, she wanted to talk. Now is not the time to talk, not on the phone, when I get back to town. She sighed and handed the phone to her son. Paul successfully completed his trip to Cincinnati a day early. When he returned to the city, he went to a new apartment, got a key, and stayed the night. It was a little scary, without my wife and children. Maybe he'll get used to it, and sometimes the children will be here. On Sunday, Paul came to his family's house. He didn't have a suitcase. As soon as he entered, Mary noticed it. She was frightened. Paul was playing with the children. She loved watching this. She was gripped by fear that her family as she knew it was over. No suitcase, no kissing either. Mary watched for a while until the three began to wallow. She started crying. Paul noticed this. He sent the children to the playroom. I rented a place, Mary. I can see you're sad, but it can't be a surprise. Oh, Paul, sorry about Thursday. I screwed up. I won't do it again. I won't. It just shows how much you want. Other men. You're willing to deceive me, manipulate me, just so you can have other men. Are you going to divorce me? Please, Paul. Oh, damn. I can behave. I don't believe or trust you. I want a break from you. I'm not getting a divorce right now, but I need to be away from you. You know why. You're going to meet Heather or someone else. Please, let's try to stay on an even course and calm the situation down. I tried, Mary. You were just using me, trying to deceive me. Well, it will be a long time before I trust you again. You don't deserve this, and you know it. I don't want a life full of constant mistrust and surveillance. Paul and Mary put the children to bed and Paul left. Again, no hugs and kisses. He told himself that he was done with Mary. The next week, I established a certain routine. Paul would come over after work, have dinner, help put the kids to bed, and then go to his apartment. Over the weekend, he offered to take the children to his place on Saturday night. Mary refused. "I can't do this, Paul. They'll be scared. Even now, when they wake up, you're gone. They have to get used to the way things are. I'm not going back anytime soon." "Paul, maybe we should go to a counselor. We could see what could happen. We have to do this for the sake of the kids, at least." "I will think about it." He enjoyed spending time in his apartment. He was under less pressure. He wondered if Mary would start going out to sleep with people. Let him do it. This is clearly what she wants. He agreed to go to a consultant. They had a list, and they chose Joanna Baxter. Miss Baxter scheduled an introductory meeting for Friday afternoon. Paul arranged for his parents to pick up the children from school. Joanna Baxter was a woman of about 50 with steely gray hair and piercing blue eyes. She explained that she is a listener and believes that talking about problems can sometimes help solve them. She said they would each have an individual session and then another session together. She asked them what they hoped to achieve through counseling. Mary said, "I want to get back to our marriage, rebuild our family." Paul said, "I want to see if we have a chance. I want to clear the air and give it one last chance. But honestly, I believe we've come too far to make it right." She asked them to make a brief statement about what caused the breakup. Paul said, "Mary was unfaithful and brought home an illness. I somehow dealt with it because she was drunk and it was only one time. But now she wants more sex with other men. She wants me to somehow agree I can't have an open marriage." Mary said, "I obviously messed up, but we were okay after that. Our sex got better great, and well, I really wanted to have other men, and he could have other women. But if it's that important to him, I'll never bring it up again. Mistress Baxter, our sex has gotten better because Mary took over all the power after her affair, and I discovered that I enjoyed being subservient to her. But she used it to get her way and be with other men." "Did you use this, Mary?" Yes, I did. I'm not sure why I'm like this, but I am." The meeting ended, and they scheduled individual sessions for the following week. The layout remained the same, except that Paul took the kids to the zoo on Saturday. Paul's private session with Miss Baxter was a little awkward. He explained to her how exciting it was for him to be a submissive, and she needed details. He gave them. He looked down as he described some of the things he did to Mary. She asked, "Why are you so against her having a lover? Isn't that the most humiliating thing you could possibly enjoy?" "I can't accept it. I'd be a laughing stock. And when my kids found out about it, I'd lose their respect. So it's a matter of ego. Call it what you want. If we didn't have children, I would have divorced her after the illness incident. Is your position that you would never accept another betrayal? Suppose she was discreet and it happened maybe once a month." "No. Are you on her side?" "Not really. I just want to find solutions." Paul scheduled a joint session for the following week. Mary's individual session was the next day. Miss Baxter wanted to know why she was so eager to have sex with other men. "When I messed up, it freed something in me. Having sex with those two guys was amazing. I loved it. But can you tame these desires in order to return to family life? Do you even want this?" "I want to. In a way, I do. I just wish that Paul would be more compliant. After all, after that wild sex, the sex became much brighter, until we caught the disease. That probably should have alerted you." "No. Well, he found out about the night of debauchery. That led me to believe that he would probably find out about everything that was going to happen eventually. And so you try to change him. But I think you've hit a hard line. You can dominate him, but you can't change him. And the question is whether you can live with it." "I'm not sure. I mean, if I was in another city on a business trip and had the opportunity to sleep with an attractive guy, I would probably do it. No, I would definitely do it. Then how can you save a marriage? I don't see why I can't just be careful. Don't throw it in his face, but don't lie either. I don't understand it either, but that's what he believes. He is who he is. And for a long time, you were quite happily married. That night seems to have done a lot of, well, damage to the marriage. So, this won't work? I can't say. Let's have a session together. But maybe you need to decide if you even want this marriage. If he won't let you play. The week between the individual sessions and the next joint session went as usual. Paul came 3 times in the evening, played with the children and had dinner, then left immediately after going to bed. He also took the children on Sunday, and they played with other children their age in the playground near his apartment. It was fun, and he brought them back for dinner. The joint session with Joanna Baxter was intense. Baxter was very careful not to take sides, although she believed that Paul could give in a little on the issue of infidelity if it was managed correctly. She asked, "Paul, if you came home, how do you think it would work?" I might have trust issues. Looks like Mary wants his adventures more than family, perhaps even more. The last betrayal could have been hidden from me forever, if not for the illness. How would I ever know what she was doing? That's a problem. But last time you had no warning, and you didn't look too hard. Not at all. But when she was so excited when I came home, I wondered a little. But she suppressed me. She suppressed me when I found out. She could suppress me if I came back. Mary said, "I would only dominate if you asked." She paused. Politely. The women laughed, but Paul did not laugh. Not very funny. Sitting right here, I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. Mary said, "You could just go home. I won't hurt you." Would you sleep with other men? If you didn't know, what difference would it make? Disease, for example. I won't sleep with foreign sailors. Joanna Baxter watched this exchange. She interrupted them. One of you will have to give in. But in the current situation, the idea of concessions seems pointless. Either she gets her adventures, or she doesn't. Even secret relationships seem to be beyond the limits of acceptable for Paul. And for Mary, 100% fidelity is also impossible. Any suggestions? Paul said, "I want to think about all this. Anytime Mary says she's ready to be a faithful wife to keep her vows, I can come back and try. If she doesn't say that, I won't come back, and we can agree to work together." Guardianship. Mary was a little tearful. "I'll think about it too. I won't say I'll do something unless I'm sure I can do it. God, that drunken night of debauchery was such a disaster. I wish I could go back and tell Joan no." The meeting ended with a third, perhaps final, joint meeting being scheduled in 2 weeks. During these 2 weeks, Paul became increasingly satisfied with the arrangements made for the children. The fact is that in the event of a divorce, these agreements may not last long. Mary will have other men, and she can bring them home. In fact, Paul hoped that he would find himself a woman. Mary was becoming more and more unhappy with her current situation, which meant she was not having sex. She was thinking about going to the club and choosing the right guy. But that would ruin any possibility of Paul returning. If only he knew. When she found herself thinking these thoughts, she decided it was time to move forward, either with or without Paul at home. 2 weeks have passed. Mary didn't go out to sleep with anyone, and Paul never thought about it, despite some not-so-subtle efforts from Heather. The meeting was difficult. Mary told Joanna and Paul that she had real doubts about her ability to be faithful in marriage, and even about her desire to be faithful. She said, "If Paul agrees that I can go out for one night, maybe once a month, then I believe I can be faithful the rest of the time. That's my offer." Joanna asked, "How about it, Paul?" "No." That's all he said. "Okay. Then the sessions haven't helped get to the point where the marriage can continue. Perhaps we should discuss how things will go now." Mary said, "I've thought about it. Now Paul comes over for dinner, then leaves, and he takes the kids on the weekends. If he wants to keep them on the weekends, I'll be free to go out with other people. I won't do that on weekdays." Paul looked at her. What if you meet someone you want to have a real relationship with? That would worry me. If this happens, we can handle it. We can somehow include it in the agreement. Either way, you will find someone. I know you. You want a permanent woman, a wife, and you can easily find one. Then what? Joanna said, custody arrangements can be set by you, but they will not be able to predict every possible situation. Paul filed for divorce, no fault, irreconcilable differences. He and Mary agreed on a custody arrangement that gave Paul the children every 2 weekends, and 1 week out of the month. They entered into a financial agreement in which Paul would pay a small amount of child support. There will be no alimony for Mary's maintenance. Mary will live in the house. The divorce was amicable. Custody arrangements were already in place. Mary started going out on Paul's weekends. She called Ronnie, but he kept his word. So on her first night at the club with Joan, long before the divorce was final, she allowed a student to take her to Joan's house. Joan had a friend of his, and Mary was very pleased with the result. After this, Mary entered the mode of a woman of easy virtue. She and Joan would pick out guys on Fridays and Saturdays, have sex, and sometimes swap partners. They had a regular schedule of disease testing. One evening, when Mary was dancing in a club with a young guy, Ronnie came up and tapped him on the shoulder, offering to replace him. The guy was not happy, but Mary smiled at him goodbye. She and Ronnie danced. Ronnie asked, "Are you here to find a guy?" "Yes, maybe you are." "Are you still married?" "No." "Well, okay then." He took her to his new apartment. He received a semi-permanent assignment at a local base. Mary and Ronnie picked up where they left off. Sex with Ronnie was better than anyone Shed had lately, and Ronnie was having a great time too. It seemed to him that they were very compatible sexually. They decided to continue dating, and at least at first not seeing others. Meanwhile, Paul accepted Heather's proposal. During and after the divorce, Heather spent about 3 nights a week at Paul's apartment. Not on the weekends when he had the kids. One day he introduced her to the children. She played with them for a while. Then she left. Paul was happy to have sex with Heather. It was ordinary sex, without hints of submission. They both liked it. But neither of them considered the relationship to be exclusive or perhaps permanent. One day, a new cafe opened next to Paul's apartment. He came in to try their products initially. It wasn't that crowded, especially at 600 am. When Paul first came in, he liked the coffee, and the pastries were even better. He started going there every weekday morning, and sometimes on weekends he noticed a young woman, Penny, who seemed to be there and act as manager. She was younger than him, with brown hair and brown eyes. She had a sweet face and was always friendly. One Saturday, Paul took his 2 children out to bake. Penny was there, and she had a girl, Donna, her daughter. She was the same age as Amanda, 4.5 years old. They met. Little Paul was also introduced, but was more interested in his donut. The cafe became busy, and Paul offered to look after Donna for a while. He and the 3 children went into a corner. After about 30 minutes, the flow of customers thinned out, and Penny walked over and sat down. "Thank you, Paul. You saved me today." "No problem. I didn't know you had a child." "Yes, I'm a single mother. My parents usually take care of it when I'm working, but today they went on a 2-week cruise." "Can't cut your hours?" "Some. But this is my place, and I feel like I should be here." "You own this? A cafe?" "Yes, I took a big risk, but it seems like everything will be fine." She smiled. "If you keep coming every day, it will help. Your coffee is good, and I enjoy the company. I love seeing you here, Penny." She blushed. "I'm flattered. Maybe we could go somewhere sometime?" "Of course. But don't you have a girlfriend?" "I'm divorced. I have a friend with benefits. Maybe you've seen her." "I did. She's quite attractive." "Penny, me and Heather aren't exclusive, and we know that won't happen." They agreed on a time for Paul to be with the kids and Penny to be with Donna to go to the Science Museum. This date went very well. Penny lived with her parents about 2 blocks from the cafe. Paul took her home after the museum, and they set up a real date when her parents returned, and Paul had no children. Paul invited her to dinner and a movie. to women's cinema. She cried, but he didn't. He liked a movie that he would never have seen if he hadn't been trying to win Penny. He didn't get her that night. And I didn't try. He got a good kiss at her door. The next night, he hosted Heather, and in the morning, he told her that he might be starting a serious relationship with Penny, the woman from the cafe. Heather took it okay. Well, see what happens, Paul. It wouldn't last long anyway. I really like you, Heather. You kind of restored my ego. You're so sexy. Well, let me know. I'll see you at work anyway. The next date with Penny ended at Paul's house and in his bed. He was delighted with her. She was active, passionate, and very, very creative. Penny and Paul began to see each other often. Their children got along. Paul was invited to dinner with Penny's parents, and everything went well. One night when they were alone at his house, there was a moment when they discovered that they both liked the game of submission. So all their sex was intense and rewarding. Penny and Paul went to a restaurant and club one Saturday when the children were supposed to be with Mary. It was several months later that Penny began sending Donna and Paul's children to Mary. It worked well. Penny and Mary met, and Penny saw no warning signs from Mary. But that day, when Paul and Penny just sat down at the table, they saw Mary and Ronnie at the next table, or rather in the booth. Paul was unhappy, mainly because he thought his children were with Mary. Where are the children? My mom came to babysit them. She loves them all, and they're used to her. Well, ours are. But Donna will be okay, too. Penny said, I wish you had told me. Yes, we decided to go when she came over tonight, so here we are. She turned to Paul. How are you, Paul? Paul looked at Ronnie with a level expression. He turned to Mary. I'm fine. That's all he said. Ronnie was out of sorts. He turned to Paul. I want to apologize for that night. I know it ruined your marriage. I never wanted that to happen. I was in shock. But you're still here. Paul's face was almost neutral, but not quite. Mary said he didn't come to me. He said he didn't want to be my holy grail. Ronnie added, we met at a club by chance, after your divorce, and, we always got along well. Paul looked. There was a pause while everyone waited for his answer. Ronnie seemed a little tense. Finally, Paul said, it's none of my business what happened after the divorce. I appreciate your holy grail position, but all the damage was done that first night. Penny watched this with interest. She had met Mary before, of course, but not for real conversation, and she never met Ronnie. Those two were sitting in a four-seater cabin. Penny turned to the hostess, who was nervously watching the exchange. Maybe all four of us can use this booth, save a table. The other three weren't so happy with the idea, but even if Penny and Paul took the table they were brought to, they would still be right next to each other, and Penny was interested in watching the dynamics. She trusted Paul not to attack Ronnie, partly because Ronnie was bigger than Paul and looked stronger. She thought it might be deceiving. Paul didn't look strong. He had a layer of softness that made him look weak. But he was strong, and she knew it. Of course, Mary knew this too, but perhaps not Ronnie. So the four of them sat in the cabin. Ronnie sat down next to Mary. He sat on the edge. Penny made sure Paul slid into the booth first. Just a little precaution. Penny was a little mischievous, but it was mischief, not malice. Paul and Penny ordered drinks, and so did the other two. Ronnie asked Penny what she did. I own the coffee shack, not far from our apartment. Mary said, Penny has a daughter, Donna, who spent some time at my house with the children. Ronnie said, I was at the coffee shack. It's a nice place, but not near the base. I don't think I saw you there. I'm not always there like I was at the beginning. Mary said, I don't know how you do it all, Penny. Paul helps. My mom helps. And I have good staff at the cafe now. Penny and Mary started talking about a clothing store that had just opened next to the coffee shack. Ronnie and Paul listened without saying anything. They ordered dinner. Paul asked Ronnie about his appointment in the Navy. I think I'm here for the long haul, or at least for a while. I have a job securing supplies for ships. It's a big responsibility, and the last guy messed up. I'm not there yet, so I expect to be here until I mess up myself. Paul asked him about the software they use to track inventory and provide order reminders, and they actually started discussing it. The women now had to watch, but both were pleased that the guys were polite, if not friendly. After they finished the main course, Mary suggested they go to the ladies' room, and Penny went with her. Mary asked Penny, "Well, how is he? Really?" "Yes, yes, really. We get along great. And the kids too, as you know." "Oh, okay. You want to know if I subdue him?" "Yes, sometimes." "Oh, I tried to push too hard. And we were done. I had delusions of grandeur. Don't make that mistake. Paul is a good guy." "I know. I want something permanent." He's cautious. "But I'll try. How's it going with you and Ronnie?" "It's still in question. We're doing great in bed. I'm not sure if he wants marriage. I'm not sure if I want it." They returned to the table. Paul and Ronnie were talking about baseball. Both knew a lot about him. The evening ended without any fighting. About a month later, Paul proposed to Penny. She threw herself on his neck and kissed him in agreement. They got married 2 months later. All the children and parents were there. Neither Mary nor Ronnie were there. Penny asked about it, but Paul refused. Gradually, Penny and Paul took on more responsibility for raising Paul's children. It was easier for everyone. Mary and Ronnie never became more than sex partners. Both started dating other people. Mary took men to her home, but not when the children were there. This restriction partly contributed to the children spending more time with Paul. Penny became pregnant a year after their wedding. She opened a second cafe. Paul took over some of the work in the coffee business, accounting, orders, and inventory. Penny handled the hiring, bake testing, and decorating. Cafes flourished. Paul's business was also doing well. He didn't need to spend so much time at work. His staff were wonderful, especially Heather. Besides the obvious advantages, it was effective. Rodney Jr. was born 2 years after the wedding. Then Penelope. When all the children were at home, it became noisy. Most often it was loud laughter, but sometimes loud screams. As time went by, Penny and Paul were quite compatible, laughing at the same things. Paul also enjoyed taking Penny to chick flicks. He almost always liked them, but he would never admit it outright. Penny knew this. Paul was a romantic, no doubt about it. The children grew up, went to school, and the time came when Penelope had to graduate from school. All the children were either in college or had already graduated. Paul Jr. became an engineer. Amanda attended law school. Thank God that my parents were successful. When Penelope left for college, Penny and Paul went on a long cruise in the Mediterranean. They also had a lot of time at home alone. Penny was having a great time with Paul. Paul loved every minute of it. Mary, never married. She was about 50 and alone. She had 2 men who came when she called. She still looked good and was working on it. But in the end, when she thought about it, she wanted someone special by her side. Just like Paul was before that disastrous night when Mary ruined her life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.